Welcome to a wonderful new episode of Roll for Crit. I'm Will Keeler.
I'm Jonathan Estes, and indeed it will be wonderful.
So nice.
So wonderful, in fact. Before we get to the meat of the episode, I want to make a quick video/site-related announcement, which is that this Friday, if you're watching this on the day it's released, I believe it will be November 13th, we will be participating in Extra Life, which many of you probably participated in last weekend or watched other people doing it.
Right. I believe they do say, though, pretty much like the entire week. They have one day sort of the start where a lot of the big ones will happen.
Right.
Unfortunately, due to
scheduling constraints.
Yep.
Ours is going to be taking place this week, but nonetheless, it will be exciting. That will be, if you aren't familiar with it, it's people do a 24-hour usually, or however long they can do, stream of them playing any kinds of games, and it's encouraged. It's part of this charity foundation to donate money to children's hospitals and wherever your location is. So that's what we're going to be doing, trying to raise money, and also you can watch us. We're going to be streaming it live for 24 hours.
You get to watch us act like kids to help kids.
Yeah. Some people may be at Board Game Geek Con. I'm pretty sure it's going to be that same weekend. So
of recording or of the Extra Life?
Of us recording.
Okay.
So if you're go back to your hotel and you want to watch people play games after you've played more games, you can do that there too. So that should be exciting. So stay tuned to our channel, to our Twitter and all that for more details, for exact times and dates and everything like that. But it will be basically Friday morning to Saturday morning that weekend. So join us. It will be a lot of fun. But we do have actual news today,
yes.
Some of which quite intriguing.
Oh, really?
The first of which is, guess what? Surprise, surprise.
Let me guess. Asmodee now owns the United States.
You got it!
Yeah!
Somehow, maybe less surprising than that, Fantasy Flight has announced a new game in their line of Star Wars games called Star Wars Rebellion. This time around, it's going to take place across not one, not two, but all three of the original trilogy movies. It is going to be a two-player asymmetric experience, wherein one player is the rebels, the other is the
Jar Jar
rebellion.
Binks.
That's an expansion that hasn't come out yet, and essentially you have ships, you have characters. It's a huge, it encompasses a lot of different aspects of the series. And you're taking over like sections, you're fighting for power over sections of the galaxy to get more resources to produce better ships, and then you're also attacking each other with your ships. And like I said, it's asymmetrical, so the rebellion is more, they don't have a big army, so they're kind of more subterfuge style, and the others, the alliance, what are they called? The Empire are beaten down on them. You have more force to throw at them.
I do like this idea, and I think because I remember when you first told me about this game, I was like, is this based off the Risk, so to speak, or it's a new Risk that's just actually something else that from Hasbro,
right? Which we talked about a little while ago on a podcast.
But,
both are asymmetric experiences,
and I think this actually works really well from the Star Wars advantage, and I would argue what I would call the two-team war advantage. Of this idea of you really feel like you're playing as the rebels. You're not just two clones. You're not playing chess, or you're not, because both sides aren't the same. And I think this is really great for Star Wars. It's definitely really cool. That's why I think the other one's cool, because you actually control somewhere two Jedis and Sith Lords are fighting with blades, but you also got the ships in space. Everyone plays a role. I would actually really hope after the big Star Wars craze that they go, all right, Transformers has two needs. Let's actually do some cool games like this. You take different fronts. I like this idea, and I think this is. And we actually haven't heard any Transformers games that aren't just a Monopoly clone. I think this is a great idea for that sort of and even like G.I. Joe, that time where there's two different teams, and while they're different.
Both Hasbro properties.
Yeah, those are just the two that come to mind. But just the idea that they're not equal, the characters are actually different. So we shouldn't try to how can we shoehorn this to make it a chess game? We should let's actually make it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely a barrier that a lot of licensed games they don't seem to get past. They don't, because I guess it's almost twice as much work. Well, no, you're sort of designing two different games.
It is, and I think the other thing that happens by making it symmetrical, is what happens is you're okay, sticking with the Transformers one. It would be Optimus Prime is the leader and Megatron is the leader. That's it. There's nothing special about them otherwise.
Right.
And that's very boring, but you can still make it that asymmetrical, make them interesting, but still close. Like, for example, the Star Wars Battlefront game, in which there's a power-up where someone on the Alliance can actually be, or the Rebels, sorry, not the Alliance.
Rebel Alliance.
The Rebel Alliance can become Luke, while the other one can become Vader. Right. And while they're both very similar, they're both going to rip through the battlefield.
Right.
Luke's faster and has a force push, while Vader's slower but can throw his...
It's all about giving you that sense of personality.
Yes, and I think that's what Star Wars has just been really hitting on very well.
And this one, supposedly they claim you'll be able to freeze Han Solo in carbonite, as well as many other big moments and characters will be involved throughout. It sounds like it really covers everything. Two questions that I have after hearing this news. The first one is, how much farther can Fantasy Flight push and get away with making Star Wars board games, because they have the rights to the miniatures lines? But so basically Fantasy Flight, their rights extend to miniatures only, but they keep getting away with making these board games by saying, well, they have a lot of miniatures in them, so it's a miniatures game.
What about the LCG though?
Oh, that's a card game. So I guess all I know is they don't have the rights to the board game. That's why Risk Star Wars is Hasbro, and other Star Wars games, all their Star Wars board games have figures in them and things like that. But it seems like, especially with Imperial Assault and now this, they're really riding the line. But the legalese must be pretty strong if they can getting away with it, because this is clearly a board game. There's no.
No, it's definitely very interesting. This,
how do they define?
I'm guessing Hasbro then technically has the right to all board.
I think
Star Wars?
That's how it works. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is, from Hasbro point of view, they want to make the board games, but a lot of the ones they make are usually quick to come out. They're just Monopoly. You tag Star Wars on. But Fantasy Flight feels, I think,
they're much more of a gamer.
Yeah.
Brand.
So I'm wondering if Hasbro goes, look, you can make one a year or something, and we're not going to bust your chops.
Right.
And I can understand that with Imperial Assault, they can get away with that, because they're like, look, there's a base, but really all the expansions are miniatures.
Well, and the same thing's going to happen here, I'm sure.
So all the miniatures?
There's a lot of miniatures in this, including 2 Death Stars. One's at half in construction.
Here's my question, though. Do you actually play through all movies at once, or is it we're going to play through the first movie?
No, it's like a broad general thing. And it's sort of like in Firefly, the game, you might encounter episode 2 something, and episode 7's it'll happen like that. My other question was, do you think they will ever make a game based off the prequel movies? Because so far they've been avoiding it like the plague.
Well, I don't think
even X-Wing, I don't think, has any ships from the prequels.
No. I don't know why the ship line. That one I can't answer, because I don't see any reason not to. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, because, one, they didn't do well. So we have to understand. But two, this is the other thing. The new movies that come out are the sequels to these movies.
That's true.
So you're really refreshing people on these, which this is what everyone remembers with fondness. And remembers. No one goes back and thinks, if you say Anakin,
right,
Star Wars, they think Darth Vader and a Stormtrooper. There's a reason why so many people dress up as Stormtroopers,
right,
not Clone Warrior.
Well, on the other end of that, though, so this is slated for 2016, early 2016. Why do you think this has clearly been in the work for a couple of years? They must have known these new movies are coming. Also, why don't they have one based off the new movies ready to go? Is my question. My other question. I have so many questions.
First off, I think your first question actually sort of answers that, which they have to be very careful how many games they come up with.
Maybe, yeah.
So if you're gonna put your money into only one game, which trilogy are you gonna put it on?
That's true. Yeah, because what if they don't know? Maybe this one will bomb, and then they'll be stuck with it.
Well, not even bomb. More if they come out with too many games.
Right.
Then Hasbro's gonna be like, whoa, there.
Well, maybe that's still speculation, but yeah. It's an interesting theory. It's an interesting subject. If you are interested in this game, which, let's face it, everyone is.
But going back to what you said with the X-Wings, I'm like, why wouldn't you
want
that?
Come on.
I think it'd be cool to have some of the old ships.
Naboo Starfighter.
Yeah,
a pod racer.
Well, what would be interesting, I think, pod racers. Well, actually, no, for Imperial Assault.
Yeah, there you go.
But the Armada, to actually, because you remember the stations they had that would control the droids?
In
Like I think it was the episode 1.
yeah, kind of.
Like, what if you could put stations down? They didn't move, but they like would attack anything in a range.
I don't know. There's stuff you could do for sure. There's lore there that you could toy with. I don't know. Something to think about. Fantasy Flight. So that's Star Wars.
You mean Disney?
Yeah, either or. So we'll hear more about that in the coming months. Next bit of news, we talked a few weeks ago about the game Colosseum and how they're relaunching it. Tasty Minstrel is reprinting it as a Kickstarter. We just got to look at the box art, and it's somewhat controversial.
Oh,
and that's the reason I wanted to bring it up.
Is there like a Roman shaking hands or something?
No, all right. So here, I'll bring it up behind us. This is the comparison of the two. So this is the first time you can look behind us if you want to get a better look.
Okay.
But it's a much broader, more cartoony, which we had talked about. Wondered if they would do that.
And I don't think it's that bad of a.
I don't know. It doesn't.
Is that the actual controversy?
That is the controversy.
The style?
People just the style and just the general the look and feel of it.
Because I wasn't sure because I'm looking at it and it looks like there's a tiger there. I wonder if the controversy says there's no tigers.
No, it was not a historical inaccuracy controversy. I don't know, but I thought it was an interesting the divide between what a big difference art can make, and especially when you contrast such incredibly different styles. The kind of ultra realistic. I don't know if it's ultra, but realistic versus cartoony. And I don't know. I'll admit, when I first saw the new box art, I did kind of get a pang of, ooh, I don't know if it's not what I'm used to.
I'm going to say this is interesting because I've actually had the exact opposite reaction. To me, I'm like, oh, I like the new artwork now. It looks much more in today's age. Like, to me,
for sure,
looking at Colosseum looks like a very stale Euro game artwork. If I was to judge it based simply on the artwork, like I wouldn't
begrudge you for that either. But then again, I might say, well, that's true to the game.
Yeah, but I mean,
in terms of selling it to people.
Yeah, like if I'm trying to judge based on like the kind of game, I would be like, okay, it's probably like the same thing as 100 things on the shelf.
Yeah.
Like not. And to me, that's why I guess I'm also more fan of Tasty Minstrel's artwork and stuff. But I can understand why people want it. I mean, it's a classic, and it's sort of hard when someone redoes, especially if it's your fan favorite.
I think, for me, I feel like there's a middle ground that they could have found that isn't quite as dry as the original, but a little more. I don't know the word I'm looking for. I don't want to say classy, but a little
classical.
More, classical. Something, especially because it is based off.
But
Roman
that's the thing. At the same time, I can understand the argument on the other side.
Yeah,
it's not a bad argument saying like you want the old artwork. I just think I like the new look.
Anytime they update a game, there's going to be old fans who don't like it and people who do.
I mean, the fact that we just talked about how we both looked. Our first impression, you're like, and I'm like, yeah, and then we both look and we're like, well, I understand.
Yeah, for sure. To be honest, neither one thrills me completely. But I think, it remains to be seen what all the artwork and the rest of the cards, how they redo it. I'm still interested because that will really...
Because I don't think it goes...
We're judging the book by its cover.
I mean...
For sure. We're judging the cover.
Yeah.
We're not judging the book. Just the cover.
A lot of times... I mean, looking from the cover, it is cartoony, but I didn't think it was too cartoony, at least from what I see. Like I don't expect to see the little Roman PC like a Roman guy like holding a rubber sword and just like his tongue sticking out like too far.
Right, it's not Monty Python.
And speaking of which, it reminded me of how we talked about some of the pieces we didn't even know, and they're like, that's the comedian. What?
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So like I feel like this style though, because they do this style could probably emphasize more like that's the comedian. Like you won't just be looking at a color piece. Because I felt like a lot of times when we play, we look more not as I see horses, I see brown. You have 3 yellow squares. You have 3 like
for sure.
So I think that's what this is gonna do. I'm hoping at least.
Yeah.
And I agree. There's definitely a middle ground somewhere, and that's what we want. We want it to pop a bit more, so it's not just you can easily break this down to numbers and just I have 3 yellow and 4 blue. You actually feel like I have 3 comedians.
Yeah, there is actually, definitely a change in the feel and the gameplay.
But what I'm curious about is because I know we've played this game quite a bit, and we've enjoyed it. But we have many times talked about and tried a couple of different rules. like hiding your money and things like that. I'm wondering if they're going to add any things like that into
Yeah,
the
I'm
mix.
curious. They might even
Because I think even
integrate it or make it a variant.
the person who owns the game has talked about, I can't remember, I think it was this game.
Our personal friend, not
Yes.
not the company behind it.
Some house rules he read about.
Yeah, I think we've played with house rules that we don't even know about because we always use them.
Because I think the creator said you should play with them. Like,
Yeah, but anyway, it'll be
Yeah.
interesting. Let us know which one you think you prefer, and if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, then I'm sorry, you have
Well,
no idea
look
what
it
we're talking
up
about.
because, to be honest, it's definitely a game to look out for.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure exactly when it launches, but it must be very soon because they've got the box art. So
That's box art. As soon as you see that, Kickstarter.
That means it's ready.
That's all Kickstarter needs.
it's that old saying the old sailors used to say: "Box art on the screen, Kickstarter on the scene."
I was like, does you actually have something up? Are you actually going, or are you just gonna like?
That's a real thing. So we do have one Kickstarter Pickstarter to bring you today. It is called Awaken. It is an RPG from a team based in Croatia, where if I'm not mistaken, you hail from, or your family
my
does.
my entire mother's side does. Yes.
So this game, in fact, is based on Mediterranean folklore and mythology and things like that. And essentially, it's this. It, to me, sounded kind of like a Game of Thronesy-ish fantasy universe where there's political intrigue and things like that. But where it changes is this group of people has entered the scene. I forget what it's like, the Vasali, something like that, who have powers and they're these mythological beings that are supposed to help them take over and manage society. And in the game, you play as those beings, and you have different special powers or whatever. One of the things that is cool and different about this RPG, besides the setting, it rewards creativity. So when you take an action, if you are able to describe your action in a colorful and interesting way, the game master can award you extra dice to roll for your move and things like that. And also there's a kind of it's definitely on the lighter spectrum of setup and for an RPG, not something that you could probably use it as a beginner RPG, it seems like. We haven't played it, of course, we're just talking from the Kickstarter. But it seems pretty cool. It's called Awakening, and it is on Kickstarter now. There's a bunch of extra things you can get with it, like what do you call it? There's like a narrator screen, they call it, and there's maps, and there's really nice illustrations and colorful things, and it's based on your heritage.
Oh yeah, that's great. But to me, what I like about this is hits a lot of the at least for me, the points what I look for in an RPG. I think, first of all, anything that pulls from mythologies we're not used to hearing is always a plus, because even, like, for example, the dragon, for example, appears everywhere. It's a very common theme. Like, every culture has some form. But the thing is, each one is different. So even if you've heard dragon before, they're slightly different enough. It's interesting to hear how it's different.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's why I think, and I mean, I don't know, do you know any Croatian myths?
Well, I've seen like the different like kind of classes you can. I know one is like colossi. There's a few other interesting ones, the mythical ones. Yeah.
The other thing is, I love the idea more about rewarding the creativity and stuff, because before, for example, Dungeons and Dragons, for example, is before I thought it was just rolling the die. I rolled a 5, you pass, you fail. Like, that was it.
Right.
But
which if you're playing with the wrong people, it can be.
Right. And the new D&D is trying to fix that, which is very good. But I liked the few times we play, what I like is not rolling and seeing I beat something. Is like when one time, I bring up this example, a goblin fell down and just running up, grabbing him and going, "Tell us what you know." And like doing like weird stuff. And the idea of being cool would be like, okay, I jump off this wall to pivot and turn to fire an arrow, and then I do a duck and roll. Would sound really cool to reward that kind of stuff, to actually be like, to think that creative stuff. So you actually think, what's the layout so I can come up with this cool maneuver or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you like creativity and weird mythology, check out Awakening. We'll have a link to it below. That's our Kickstarter Pickstarter. Now, there was one, I hesitate to call it a topic of the week.
Oh, man.
that I think you were going to throw at us to talk about. So why don't you introduce it to end our show?
So recently I watched a video on a guy named Bartle, who did a new idea for video games called Bartle's Taxonomy, which focuses on the different types of people who play multiplayer video games.
Is this like, so this is recent?
Yeah.
Because Bartle's taxonomy sounds like it's
Oh,
like
no,
the
no.
1800s.
Well, no, I would say it's old in terms of video game history.
Okay.
But not in terms of, it's not like an 18...
Video games
yes,
existed.
Yes. But like they're, considered humanity, they're very recent.
Uh-huh.
But, so I watched a video, and this is talk about video games, but I thought it was interesting because I think it actually applies a lot to board games just as well.
Okay.
So I'm going to state that's how I found it, but this is the actual idea. Bartle was doing an interview about what people wanted in a multiplayer game. And then he found out, because he thought like, oh, they'll probably all say the same thing, they're looking for this. Turns out that's not true. And he found out, though, it wasn't just each person had their own thing, so it wasn't just like an individual idea. He was actually able to group them into 4 groups. The 4 groups are the achievers, the explorers, the socializers, or socialites, whatever, and the killers. And depending on the group you're on, that's what you wanted. And then after seeing each group, he actually was able to fit them into a graph, which makes it really interesting. Now, before I go into what the actual graph is, I'm going to explain what each group is.
Good idea.
First are the achievers. These are your guys who want to get the high score to prove sort of their greatness. Like these are the guys who, surprise, going to get the achievements. Like they're not just going to beat the game. They're going to show that they're the best at the game.
Okay, yeah. They're going to wreck the game.
Well, not wreck the game
and
exactly.
the other players.
Not exactly.
I was being metaphorical.
Like, in a board game, this would be probably the kind of guy like you can beat the game, but if you beat it, like Hanabi,
Yeah.
they're going to be the
get
ones who
the
want
max score.
They're looking for the max score.
That's wrecking it to me. Keep going.
Well, because I meant they're not the players not so much, but I'll get to that. The next is the explorers. These are the guys who are going to like the story. They're here to just explore the world. These are probably the guys who are going to play the game. They're not really here to win. They just want to know about what world they're in. Next are the socializers. I mean, that title probably sums up what they are. They're there to socialize.
Right.
And finally, the killers. The killers really, well, obviously most involving killing, they're really the guys who want to do the taunting. Like, they're going to be the ones who love picking on someone who might be a lower level because they can. Or if like, maybe holding a monopoly, sort of forcing people to have to deal with them. They're like might be the guys who always hold all the wheat, so you have to trade with them. Like they're the ones you have to like. So just the ones who have usually the evil green.
So it's not necessarily just they like fighting other players. They're actively aggressive about it. And,
yeah, they're the aggressive. That's why when you said demolish, I'm like, well, that word belongs to another group.
I have my own vocabulary. It means many different things to many different people.
It does, just like you have your own time, Jonathan time. It is actually 4 a.m, Jonathan time.
Yeah, there's a lot of things about me.
Check your clocks.
So, all right.
So
that's the
then
basics.
after seeing the group, he's actually didn't just say, here's the groups, they're done. He actually made a graph so you could actually plot games on where they'd fit. Where the x-axis would be players on one end, far end, world on the other. While the y-axis would be interacting and acting. The acting would be acting on something, similar like if a nail, you're holding the hammer, you're acting on the nail. Interacting, however, would be you're interacting with the hammer, you're holding the hammer. So an achiever is someone who acts upon the world. He's trying to beat the world. While an explorer interacts with the world, he's just trying to work with the world. While a socializer interacts with other people, and the killer acts upon people. So by doing this graph, you can actually look at different games and plot them like, okay, what does this mechanic do? Well, it raises us to act more on players, or maybe interact more in the world. So after seeing this, it was sort of interesting to be like, okay, well, how do board games do this? And then I thought, well, Arkham Horror, for example, is definitely, I'd put very much more interacting with the world. You're not acting on players as much. It's really about
certainly
the
any
story.
co-op game
Yes.
is more.
But
on
in
that
particular,
side.
this has a lot about the story of the world.
Right.
Meanwhile, something like, I'm thinking Descent, while it has a lot of interacting in the world, does do I think a lot more of socializing and acting on the player because it has the dynamic of the one versus all.
Right.
And like I'm sure you can think of some games now how they sort of jump across.
Well, it seems like Achiever kind of could be almost any games, except maybe party games.
Right. No, like no party game would be near the achieving.
Right.
That's like certain groups
are
opposites of each other.
Yeah.
And actually, they also talked about the video I watched how certain groups like interact with each other. Like achievers hate killers, but killers hate explorers, things like that.
Well, my discussion questions are how accurate? How do we think there's any like other groups that they in board games, since this was designed for video games, maybe that they don't capture, and then follow up. Which ones are we?
Well, that's the interesting because I think a bunch of different people and where they fit in. So I'm going to answer that one first because that's one I've already been thinking about a lot more. For myself, like I would consider myself an explorer achiever. Like you can fit into sort of multiple. Like I do like achieving, but most of my achieving came from wanting to explore, like find all the weird stuff. But for my one friend who's I think sticking with video games, like he likes a lot of Call of Duty, that kind of game. He's an achieving killer. Like he likes the PvP. That's his bread and butter.
Yeah, I'm definitely an explorer for sure.
Yeah, I think the fact that both of us love games when there's a heavy story shows that we have a strong explorer.
Yeah, for sure. So, and then probably maybe like a minor in socializing. It depends on the game. It depends on the game.
Right. Well, no, I'm not saying I don't like socializing games.
Yeah.
But definitely I'm going to lean towards. That's why you see me lean towards more the heavy story games compared to the Euro games.
That's the other thing. Like you said, it really depends on the game. A good game will bring out one of those sides in you,
right,
no matter what you typically maybe look for or identify as. It's almost not as much about the player as it is the game.
Yeah, that's the beauty. It's how does the game cater that?
Right.
And what's interesting is then if you look at it and you're making a game, you could be like, how do I balance it more? Like you could look at a game like, okay, there's no way an explorer's going to have fun here, and maybe you just can't do that. But maybe you could be like, okay, what if we add a couple backstory on the cards and stuff? Like flavor text from Magic, that's great. I love that. That's not like a whole backstory like Arkham Horror. You're not going through a story. It's just a little like, oh, so this planeswalker came here before.
So then do you think is the ideal game a balance of all four quadrants?
You have to try. That's the big thing. I definitely think Achiever is the heart. Video games is much easier, especially with the advent of achievements and trophies. In board games, that doesn't come up as much, at least from my thoughts.
To me, I feel like that's pretty much anything that gives you a score, like Agricola or whatever. You're always trying to get that.
And that's where I think the Achievers their games really shine. I definitely think an Achiever's probably, because usually it's easier to score, going to come out in a Euro game, because usually that's much more numbers. So
if there's just one winner, then there's not really, unless it's like, I'm winning, so like I won, but I also got like every weapon and every stuff like that.
The problem is, I think explorers, on the other hand, will probably gravitate away because usually you either have a lot of story or not. It's much that one. Socializers, I think, is a special one, and in fact, they've definitely hit their own weird era with the internet because you can sort of socialize without actually doing the item. Because board games themselves are really a lot more about that. In fact.
Right.
I can think of a lot of games of people who probably wouldn't say they're a board gamer, but they play what we call into board games because they're such heavy socialite games. I'd consider this Apples to Apples, Cards Against Humanity, Super Fight.
For sure.
And so the socializers have their games. So I think each group has a game, and it's just that you don't think of it like, I'm playing this game because I want to socialize.
Yeah, but I like what you said about, because like some other games you wouldn't think about, like Descent, you're communicating with each other, you're on a team. So that's still a socializing aspect of it. Even it doesn't have to necessarily be a party game.
Right.
So.
No, I mean you don't. It's just the party games, the obvious ones. Like anything that's a pure one type is going to be obvious.
I think Killer is probably the only one that I'd call not necessary for a game, at least in some part, because there's always co-op.
No, I think the reason is neither of us are killers, so we don't think like killers as much.
That's true, but
a killing game would be a game where there's a lot of player interaction, where you can sort of
negative player interaction.
Yes, not a cooperative game, obviously.
Right.
Well, maybe if you're like some of our friends who like to be cooperative and I'm winning.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would be a socializing game.
Right. For example, Magic the Gathering really does support this. If you can control deck, because you're like, nope. Like you just pin someone down, depending on what your deck you're playing. And I think the killer really loves the one versus all, because playing as the one means you are usually more powerful than each person alone.
I guess now the more that I'm thinking about it now is like, I guess you could probably do away with any one of them, depending on your tastes. Like, because I'm like, well, some people don't care about the theme, and then there's Some people don't care about talking to other players. They just want to
no.
play. So yeah, I think maybe a good rule is like you should have at least 3 of the 4 or something.
Well, I think that usually happens. Like when when a balance, I think would be not as much that they're all perfectly equal, as much as
represented
like
in some way.
For example, I could sit at the table like this might not be my favorite game, but I could sit through it.
Right.
Like there's a little bit of.
They give you something to chew on.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think another great one where socializing killers go together is something where there's a traitor mechanic. Those are very good for both the killer and the socializer.
Yeah.
Because as the killer, if you get the Cylon card, you're just smiling there the entire time, taunting everyone.
Yeah. Oh, Battlestar is definitely a socializing. That has some of
That's
everything.
no, that's the killer game. Yeah, that's
really
no.
That's a little bit of everything. Maybe not.
Yeah, well, think about like how that game does fit. I mean, the achieving maybe actually the achieving I think is still in there because it's still. I don't know about the expansions as much, but like achieving it
Fewest casualties or something.
But the killer, he's the traitor. Anything with a traitor obviously fits the killer because, being the guy who has that extra information, just the evil laughter of everyone going insane.
And there's like a mafia would be another ultimate social, like you said, anything with the traitor.
So what about other people, Well, do you think the most people know usually fit into one group, or do you think you have a spread?
I think most people probably are either an explorer or the killer, kind of. Like a socializer, I feel like the other two, I think mix into everybody. I think probably most people at least somewhat strongly identify with one of those two, one of those more than the other, and the other one's a mix.
I do feel in our play group is definitely more killers and explorers. I definitely think people usually fit into one or the other.
I don't think anybody we know is real like that's the only this is what I like. That's it.
No, I do. I find most people usually fit into 2 groups.
Yeah,
but I would say during most people I knew in college, I would actually argue a lot more of them were socialites or whatever, and achievers.
Yeah. If you're not
I
didn't think
the killer appeared. And outside of our group, I don't know many explorers. Like in video games, especially, is where this refers. Like when I talk to you, it's like, oh, this story happened. Oh, but the people I play Destiny with, none of them I would give the explorer tag to. Like they're not looking for the weird stuff.
Right.
They're definitely achievers, and I'd say some of them in the case of killers.
It's interesting.
Like I know it's like how you said like everyone I think is explorer. I'm like, well, to be honest, outside my group, I don't see that.
Well, socializing is the one I'd say that for board games, if you don't at least have a little bit of that, then
you might be in a wrong boat.
Yeah, then you just like to play like online against faceless strangers, I guess.
Or you go to just like card tournaments where you don't really socialize. But I do find it funny because the socialites are probably the weirdest group of the bunch because when they're talking about interacting and how they interact, they mentioned how
bunch of weirdos.
Killers. I mentioned earlier how achievers hate killers because killers get in the way of the achieving, and killers love that.
Right.
But explorers, on the other hand, don't care, so the killers hate that because they can't troll them. But also, the explorers may find some stupid, weird combination that embarrasses the killers. Which in turn the achievers love because they're like, you found this weird gun, tell me how.
If you want to embarrass the killers, just play their latest album.
But
whoa!
So those 3 have that big sort of triangle interaction. Socialites, on the other hand, really they're their own circle. The more socialites, the happier they are. The less socialites, the less happy they are. I mean, they don't like killers because killers kill them, and
nobody
that's not
likes
nice.
Killers.
Nobody. But so really, the socialites sort of have their own circle. Like they influence each other.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
This Bartle guy, we should get him on the show. I want to hear his thoughts.
No, I mean, in particular, like what you said, like if there'd be updates, especially, like I said, all this is for video games, but would the board games be, like, would you even change the names, like as Achievers change to something else, or Socialize?
We should take a week and fix it for him.
Jonathan's fix.
I'm curious, people watching, if they think they fall into one of these groups.
Yeah.
Or if they think that or if there's a group that, like I suggested earlier, maybe that isn't represented there. Nothing came to my mind off the top of my head, but I'm sure you could think of something in terms of the world of board games. Let us know your thoughts, or if you have any other questions or comments of any kind, we will gladly respond to them on the show. You can leave a comment right there on YouTube, or email us, rollforcrit@gmail.com.
And of course, you can socialize us through Twitter.
Oh.
That's @rollforcrit, and our personal Twitters, not tweets.
Or if you're a real achiever,
Oh,
you
man.
could even like us on Facebook, subscribe on iTunes.
Or here, just right down there. Very
Yeah.
easy achievement.
So easy, achievement unlocked. And of course, there's our website, rollforcrit.com.
Where you can explore all the games we sell, the news articles, more videos.
I'm loving this. And don't forget, our Extra Life live stream will be Friday the 13th of November, and we've got more stuff coming up for the holidays, I'm sure, after that. So keep checking back. Stay tuned. We love all of you very, very much.
Even the killers.
No matter what, we care about you.
But for now, I'm Will Keeler.
I'm Jonathan Estes, and this has been Roll for Crit. The podcast.
The show.
The movie.
The band.
The musical. The planet.